people, citizens and non-citizens alike, beaten on the streets. We have seen detainees who have been forced to remain in stress positions for a long period of time. Indeed, with hands tied behind their back, forced to eat off of plates as a dog might have to eat. That people have been housed with feces and urine in their areas where men and women had to use the same laboratory facilities, where little attention was paid to any health care needs, even clothing needs, need for nutrition. We've seen, quite frankly, people held incommunicado, unable to contact family members or legal counsel so that they can protect and defend their rights. You're on American soil. You have the benefit and protection of the Constitution. That has long been understood. But sadly, we've seen report after report after report of constitutional rights of individuals on American soil being violated. And so our delegation, thought it was incumbent upon us as part of our responsibilities as U.S. representatives to, one, understand exactly how the mission, the core mission of the base might be impacted by the placement of one of these detention facilities on the base, how it would impact readiness, how it might impact the air mobility operations, how it might impact lethality, and how indeed it might impact morale. If you see the kinds of things that's been reported at Alligator, Alcatraz, or some of these other detention facilities across the country, what does it do to the warfighting capability, to the attitude our capable airmen, Marines, soldiers have with respect to their own duties and to the moral posture of our nation, and how important that is for the jobs that they are tasked with doing. So what we learned today, while there has been a notification by DOD that the facility here at the Joint Base McGuire and another one in Atterbury, Indiana, might be used to house one of these facilities, they're not, and they have not been ordered as yet to prepare for the location of one of these facilities. Now, we asked several questions about what might happen if the eventuality should occur. That is, a detention facility was now brought to the installation. Now, what we understand is, and I want to be very clear to stay within the bounds of our conversation because, quite frankly, and in fairness to the commanders on the base, they are as much in the dark as we are about what may happen. But they made a couple of points very clear. That the operational responsibility of the detention center, if it should come to the Joint Base, rests with the Department of Homeland Security and the subunit ICE. They recognize that they're a host, and obviously there's going to be interaction between commands, just as occurs every day with other associate units on the base. It's not, as you may be aware, there are other units that operate in the base. A prime example is the federal prison. And certainly there are interactions and there are communications, some coordination when need be, but the federal prison, as an example, operates as an independent unit on the real estate of the Joint Base. Now, having said that, we asked a number of questions about how will people, and this is the other point I think that needs to be made. The base controls access into the base and have responsibilities for security of the base. And so we ask questions about just how will detainees, who's responsible for vetting them, who's responsible for identifying them, because they're moving onto a secure facility. And we know, as we've seen even in the humanitarian mission that took place with the Afghan refugees, that sometimes, and also at other detention facilities where people have eloped from those facilities. And so how is that situation to be managed? What impact might it have on the local community? Who's going to be responsible for understanding perhaps whether an American citizen is being detained unlawfully at that base, as an example. These are questions which are still up in the air somewhat because they haven't been tasked to do all of the planning for the eventual installation of a detention facility on the bases yet. So we went through a number of concerns, certainly. We're confident that the commanders at Joint Base MDL will conduct their mission as they're ordered, and they will do that dutifully and responsibly. I have to say I am much less sanguine about DHS and ICE conducting their mission and their taskings responsibly and according to our constitutional principles and the best of what makes our country great, that we are a constitutional republic that follows the law and understands that everyone should be treated equally before the law and that everyone has constitutional rights, whether you're a citizen of this country or not. And that we in this country, it's my view, and I think I'm not alone in this view, that how we treat detainees, how we conduct ourselves, whether we're conducting ourselves according to the law, is a hallmark of what it means to be an American nation, and we need to do that in order to demonstrate to other countries about how perhaps they ought to be conducting themselves according to standards of humanity. I don't want to see at that detention center the things we've seen elsewhere. I don't want to see people living in feces and urine. I want to see the rights of women respected. I want to see people properly clothed and housed. I want to understand that people have contact with their families and lawyers if they need be so they can defend their rights under the Constitution. And if it happens out there, I think it will necessarily impact, at least on a morale basis, and perhaps on other bases as well, the warfighting capability and responsibility of that base, which is why we went there today. And if it comes up that there is if a detention facility should be there, then we will continue to monitor the situation as that eventuality demands. With that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Congressman Norcross, the dean of one of the deans of our delegation, certainly when it comes to military affairs.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the mayor for providing the establishment so we could have this conversation. Incredibly important because, as we know, the base is right there. What happens on the base can impact not only this town but the surrounding towns, and that's something. Senator Kim was going to be here today but could not make it because of what is going on in Washington. But certainly when the Afghan refugees were here, he was instrumental in bringing up all the issues that not only happen on base but the surrounding communities, whether it's healthcare, security, all the things that can happen. And certainly Herb, who has been doing an incredible job in his first few months here, because this is his backyard. Primarily, yes, we're in New Jersey. I'm a senior member from New Jersey on the Armed Services Committee, been there for 11 years. And initially hearing about what was going to potentially take place on the base immediately caught our attention. And that's where I want to start, to thank those brave men and women who operate out of this base each and every day in the core mission of defending our country. But I'm also grateful to the leadership of the Joint Base for what they accommodated us in a matter of hours 2 days ago to put this together to give us a briefing on what is going on in the base. We regularly come up here and tour and have briefings from the base as our core issue of oversight on the Armed Services Committee. So they accommodated us very quickly and were forthright and on all the questions. That's the good news. The bad news is DHS, Homeland Security. What we're not hearing from them. I have never in my 11 years of being in Congress have been shut out by our own government trying to get the information on what might or might not happen on a base that happens to be in our backyard. Dead silence. Have we not been given the information from the armed services concerning the letter, and you got the letter, this would be going on. the idea that our own country is shutting down transparency on what they do. And our core issue as members of Congress is that oversight. And that's not happening. This ability for them to withhold information from Congress, this administration, this is more the chaos that is going on each and every day of trying to hold things back, just for asking the right questions. You've seen the reports from across this country on how we are not doing the right job of informing not only members of Congress, but our own nation on what's taking place. And I think that's a real problem. You know, ICE, Department of Homeland Security, is going to get, if this goes through, a footprint somewhere out on this massive base of 40,000 acres. What happens from there is outside of the Department of Defense, but it impacts those. And that's what brought me into this, because again, you heard the core missions of the base and how important that is for the defense of our country. Those planes that take off literally go around the world. They help refuel missions that you've all written about recently. And certainly the readiness that this base's core issue potentially could be impacted. And that's why we're here to make sure it's being done right. You know, this can get fixed. Legal pathway to immigration into our country has been broken for years. We saw what this administration did in shutting down when we did have a bipartisan plan. This is all going on because the lack of transparency, the lack of accountability to say, we are the nation of immigrants. I would look around this room and suggest to you, everybody has somebody that came from somewhere else in rather recent history. That's who we are. We believe in secure borders. But at the end of the day, we have to come together as a nation, as members of Congress, to fix this broken immigration system. So things that potentially are going to happen here on base and are happening around the country with immigrants being treated less than fairly can get fixed. So with that, we'll open up for questions.
Yep.
Shoot.
So who did you talk to today? And did you learn anything at all about what the plan is and where the facility would be? Is there a facility there now?
So, great question. And I'll let Herb talk about this in a little bit more detail. The base does not have any plans on where this may or may not be located. That will, if it comes, will come from DHS, the requirements that they will need. Obviously, when we had the Afghan refugees here, there was great planning that took place. They talked to the healthcare systems, they talked to the communities around the town. Is this something that has to be built from the ground up? Are they going to use existing facilities? The Department of Defense is aware of the inventory of what we have on this base. Mm-hmm. And we understand that that conversation is not happening locally. They're not coming to the people here on this base and saying, what do you have? Where do you think we should hold it? No, this is at the Department of Defense to the Department of Homeland Security. Because as Herb said, we're not sure this is actually going to take place. So Herb, if you want to explain.
We spoke to the deputy commander at the base. The commander is traveling, picking up his family to come and take up his posting. We spoke to the skipper, the leader of the naval component on the base, and their associated command structure.
In the executive secretary of the DHS, he requested approval from the Defense Department on June the 10th. When did you find out about that letter, and when would you have expected in a different scenario that you would have been informed that they were
Monday or Tuesday?
We received a letter that was dated July 15th. We received it 2 days later.
Yes. Yes.
But they first requested approval to come here on June 10th.
Yeah, they have to, it's at the department level, as described today, at the upper echelons, this communication has to take place between those secretaries, where Secretary Hexeth, that was the first communication I received, gave permission to use 2 military installations, that is Atterbury in Indiana and Joint Base McGuire, for ICE operations, for
That it would
DHS
not
operations.
impact the core mission
Yes.
of the Department of Defense.
And that's what they contend, yes.
Would you have expected to heard about that sooner, like when they were, this was first on the table, or is it okay to wait until?
Well, my understanding is that if such an eventuality should occur, the Congress is supposed to be informed. Now, this might be part of, and that's a formal sort of declaration or communication that should take place before our installations are used in this manner. Now, this initial letter from Hexas, whether that counts, you've been there longer than I, whether that counts as a communication, as the court required communication before these installations are used, I'm unclear about that. It was a short one paragraph, I think maybe 7 sentences in it.
Right. The short answer is yes. There's a relationship with the Department of Defense that I've had for over a decade, that Senator Kim has had, because this is his backyard. Now it's Herb's backyard. We would fully expect that conversation to have very early on. Again, we understand that for security reasons, not everything can be public. I've been exposed to some of the highest military secrets that our country has. The idea that we can't be brought in for Homeland Security because of an issue that they're suggesting, that national security, is just plain BS. Mm-hmm. You know, our responsibility is not only to this country but to our district. And the fact that we're not being briefed in a timely fashion, I think, is inexcusable.
And of course, we have requested repeatedly to be briefed. So just to be clear about that.
They went dark.
You know, and nothing, crickets.
Another question on what this could look like. We've seen the images coming out of Alligator, Alcatraz. Could it look like that? The Department of Defense sent a statement to me saying temporary soft-sided facilities. What have you learned about what this could actually look like?
Well, again, we've had no specifics. We know that a contractor's been hired. They're using contractors to build these facilities. I mean, as an ancillary concern, although a great one, we know that high officials in the administration are involved as investors in these private facilities, and therefore have a vested interest in the number of these that are stood up, and the amount of revenue they receive from the federal government. That's a huge concern. But past is prologue here. We've seen how they've operated their other facilities. And my concern is I don't want to see that kind of sloppy, unprofessional, unconstitutional, inhumane actions being taken at a facility on our joint base or any of our military installations, because certainly as a moral matter and as a constitutional statutory matter, what's been going on is, in my view, illegal. But when you talk about potentially impacting the mission, the core mission of the military, then we have an even greater concern about what might happen. Now, they are tasked to be able to do their mission, and this facility is supposed to operate on the base, but independently. Now we'll see. We expect that will happen because those are the orders. But as you know, people walk around the base. They might be at the commissary. They'll be in the community, coming to and fro. People talk, and as I mentioned today, if there's somebody finds out that something potentially illegal or obviously illegal is going on in that base, what happens then? That's going to walk. It's going to talk. It's going to impact morale. And so while the base has conducted admirably humanitarian missions, Kosovo, Afghanistan, they're engaged in COVID response. Those humanitarian missions, yes, as ordered and certainly appropriate for our military capability to be used in that way, in a humanitarian, life-saving way. This is not what's going on here with these detention facilities. And I would sure hate to see such a facility on the base. And I think, as I've heard from constituents on this issue, they don't want to see this at our base either.
So you don't know for sure if it's a tent or a facility?
So this is it.
How many people?
Nothing we learned today indicated one way or another. Okay. We can look back at history and say, how did we handle this with Afghanistan, which was tens of thousands more people than they're suggesting to have here. Is it going to be an unused existing facility, or are they going to stand up tents? But also you have to look at the mission of this. those coming over from Afghanistan weren't coming here and trying to break out because they're about to be deported. It was the exact opposite. It was American Air Force bringing those refugees to America. What we're talking about here are potentially those who are going to be deported, which is a very different scenario of trying to control what is going on. So there would obviously have to be security from the base, from those who are trying to leave. Nothing was learned today in any way to suggest it other than how we handled it potentially before with tens of thousands from Afghanistan.
The number here is 1 to 3,000?
That's correct. That's what our understanding is.
Have you heard from your Republican colleagues? Since I know your fellow Democrats within the delegation wanted the Republican side of the caucus to condemn this plan. Did they come up to you and privately say their thoughts or their concerns?
I've heard nothing from them. I don't know.
So Herb, who led the letter, and certainly an issue is, not that I would expect anything different. When Trump says jump, we see what happens. So I'm not really expecting, unfortunately, to hear from them, even though it impacts their district, Chris Smith in particular, but it impacts all of New Jersey. I would hope they would, because at the end of the day, we care about the same things.
So you're not exactly holding your breath to hear from them?
No, that would be a mistake.
I'm this way.
I don't know if you can clarify this. The Department of Defense letter says these people who are being held here, or could be held here, would be non-high threat individuals.
That's correct.
It also says they would have a nexus.
They'd have a nexus to some international criminal activity or...
It means I want it both ways. So, as you know, the president ran on saying we're throwing the criminals out, those who are going to be violent and attack us. I don't think there's many Americans who disagree with. We think those who got here in a very different fashion, who are violent, we want to get rid of them. The problem is that's the excuse. The reality is almost half of those who have been detained are not violent at all, aren't MS-13 or any of the other things. And that's the real difference, is how do you say they're not a real threat to this community, but they're a real threat to everybody else? It's classic Donald Trump. I want it both ways.
But yet, they've classified them as low-level threat individuals who have some nexus to some international criminal organization or been involved in drug activity.
So we'll take one more question. That's the best one we ever heard. So thank you. We appreciate you taking a few moments. And we have representatives from Senator Kim's office also here who's been involved in communicating with everything along the line.
Thank you.
Grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. All right. Good to see you, man. All right.
Yeah, I'm Chris. Nice to meet you. I'm in person.
I'm back to my high school ways.
I'm actually.
I came around the other. Well, he's on the same side of the river. It's just 200 miles away.
You look good.
You're so freaking needy.
My wife said he's saying